DJ and PK, it's 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. We are joined now by Bill Bender from the Sporting News to talk some college football. Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you guys?
Good. You know, we would really love to talk college football, but you can't talk college football these days without talking politics. That must be the most enjoyable part of your job, trying to count votes in the Senate to figure out if we're going to have a college football playoff or if we're going to have a breakaway. And what is the SEC doing? What are they doing, Bill? What do you think?
Well, you know, I think, one, it's kind of an empty gesture in some ways to me. Yes, there's always going to be Super League talk. Yes, I always find it fascinating, because the sport has different tiers, even within the Power Four conferences, even within those conferences themselves. You mentioned it. I think in the last 3 off seasons, I've probably spent more time talking about what's going on off the field than what's going on it. And that was the case, obviously, all summer this season to this point.
Yeah, and here we are now with the SEC having its meetings and people saying, oh, the threat of them leaving, it's real. I don't know that I buy it, man, because if it's real, then do it. And it seems that it's in the talk stage. What do you forecast as far as what you hear?
Well, I don't think anything of it, at least in the short term, just because in a lot of ways it's a national sport now, right? It's no longer a regional sport where when I was growing up, you watched the Big Ten, right? You watched the Big Ten, and that was it. You knew very little about the SEC and the Big 12 and, what was going out west, other than it looked nice in the winter when you saw the Rose Bowl games. But I think it's a national sport now. Who's going to watch an all-SEC league outside of the southeast part of the country? I can tell you right now, my buddies wouldn't watch it at all.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah, and to build on that, I would say, the interest in the sport, how it has changed is, and I, not just because it's my job, but I'm into like a Utah Texas Tech game. I'll sit there on a Friday night and watch Texas Tech play Houston now with interest, because I think part of it is twofold. Part of it is, the playoff is expanded and those kind of things, and the conferences are fun. And there's an NFL element to that where you get to know these guys to the next level. And two, I just love college football, right? What happened to just liking it? It's never going to be like it was in 1984, 1994, or even 2004. But it doesn't mean that the sport on the field isn't pretty cool.
Right. When the ball goes up, we tend to forget about all the other nonsense.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that's the case this year, because all of these conferences have fun storylines. Like, for example, at SEC, you've got Lane Kiffin at LSU is a very interesting storyline to me, right? Like, I know the way that he left Ole Miss and the way that he came to LSU, there's a ton of pressure on the Tigers. I know that game in September. Again, that's another example. Like, I'm excited to watch LSU play Ole Miss. Now, granted, the reason why is I want to see Lane Kiffin walk into that stadium and see how it goes. But it's just another example of why this sport has gone national and why that's good.
LSU, Texas, in the SEC title game would pit two guys who worked together for Norm Chow at USC and who both tried their luck at USC and it didn't work. I think there's a million storylines if we can get to that point. We'll see if they're good enough to get to that point. Somebody like Georgia might mess that up. But here I am on this side of the country, and I watch the Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12 as I've grown up, and I would love to see that. I think those two on a big stage like that would be, well, personally, I would find it hilarious, and who knows what they would say, text, or tweet to put a little extra juice on what would already be a big game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Texas, I've been asked about them a lot this summer, and I think one of the things about Texas is, of those teams that you might consider a true national championship contender, I'm talking Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, Notre Dame, and, those upper-tier schools, Georgia. I don't want to leave out Georgia. Georgia we're not talking about enough. Mm-hmm. I would say Texas has the most pressure on them, and specifically Sark, because they've been to the playoff 2 of the last 3 years. They've had Arch. They brought in a lot of portal additions like Hollywood Smothers, Raleek Brown, Cam Coleman, Rasheem Biles on defense. The roster's loaded. I would anticipate when that SEC preseason pool comes out, if it hasn't already, that Texas might be picked to win the conference, if not Georgia. And so, like you said, if it were Texas Ole Miss and you had Lane and Steve, these are two of the best coaches in the country that haven't won a national title. But the more time it takes for them to get to that national title, the pressure is going to build.
I'm going to throw a theory at you and get your response. The transfer portal has actually created more interest, and people talk about it's the Wild Wild West and it's got to be reined in, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of publicity and attention and viewership, even if it's from the positive, you've added these transfers. You look at like Oklahoma State, right? They've sucked these last couple years amazingly. They just went in the toilet. And now they bring in the North Texas people, the coach, the quarterback, and away they go. So that's a sense of a positive. But how about the negative, too, to where I'm a Sun Devil, man. I went to Arizona State to quote the line in the movie, right? Well, you best believe there is no way I'm going to be rooting for LSU. Right? They took the quarterback. And you just mentioned Texas, Raleek Brown. He sat on the bench. He had a hamstring a couple years ago, didn't do anything. The first-string running back gets hurt early last year. They bring him in. He runs for over 1,000 yards. He takes the money. Now, I don't begrudge him taking the money. No problem at all. That's the system. If I had a kid, if it was me, and that's what you wanted to do, absolutely. But there's no way I'm going to be rooting for Texas. So right now I got two SEC teams that I'm going to be rooting against. So they're going to pique my interest. I'm going to see every week what they're doing. So in that regard, the transfer portal, I could argue, has created even more interest in a sport that I think is the second most popular in our country.
It's created a lot of interesting side effects, that being one, where you have quarterbacks that leave one school and then go win a Heisman Trophy somewhere else. And that rate's pretty high, honestly.
Yeah, LSU has already done that to me once before. I hate him even more. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, LSU did it to Ohio State, too, by the way, with some guy named Joe Burrow. So
there you go.
He
I
did
loved
all
it
right,
then because I hate Ohio State.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it does create interest. You know what? The other thing, I think it does create opportunities. Where I would reel it in, and I've always kind of stood on this, I do think you should be able to transfer once. And then if you transfer again, you should sit a year. And if that goes against your 5 for 5, so be it. Because I think we do live in this environment where it makes it hard to re-recruit guys. But in terms of the interest of the sport, I don't think the portal has hurt anything at all. Other than, you know, it's kind of like what college basketball went through when guys were going to the NBA draft right away. I grew up in the 90s and 80s and 90s, and in the 90s, you had an attachment to, like, a basketball roster. Like, I can still reel off the starting five for, like, Arkansas in 1994, right? But you can't do that as much now. Yeah, Corliss Williamson, Scotty Thurman. I could get Corey Beck. That was a really good team, right? And I think that attachment is lost a little bit. But the trade-off is there is some excitement around the sport in places. I mean, Indiana's proof of that. If you guys would have told me 5 years ago, 3 years ago even, hey, Billy, Indiana's going to win the national title, and they're going to dominate everybody, and they're going to go 16-0, I would have told you there is no chance in you-know-what that would ever happen. But Kurt Cignetti's been able to do it on a pretty accelerated timeline there, obviously.
Bill Bender joining us. He writes for the Sporting News. He is a glutton for punishment. I love the fact that you in early July have the courage to put up college football predictions for the bowl games, the 12-team playoff, and the national championship. I'm sure fan bases are all furious with you. But BYU fans, they probably like the fact you put them in the playoff over Texas Tech. Why? What do you see there?
Well, here's the thing, and here's a secret behind the curtain. When we were putting together our college football preview magazine, which is available on newsstands, shameless plug there,
nice.
We at first had Texas Tech winning the Big 12, and this was before the Brendan Sorsby debacle that took up a month of the offseason. You slide them down, and then all of a sudden, to me, it becomes, okay, this could be – Texas Tech can still win the Big 12. I think three other teams, BYU, Utah, and then Houston, who I really like coming off a 10-win season. Those are kind of your contenders now. I do think with BYU, you bring back L.J. Martin, you bring back a strong running game, and Bear Bachmeier started to throw the ball a little bit better towards the end of the season. He had 325 yards in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Combine that with the defense. And, Utah, the one thing there is obviously the coaching staff. They're a little bit of a shakeup, well, not a little bit when Kyle Whittingham leaves. But I'm telling you, Houston, Willie Fritz has got them on the right page, and they've got two really good quarterbacks in Connor Wigman and Keyshawn Henderson. So that's that top tier of the Big 12 with schools like Arizona State and Kansas State. And you mentioned Oklahoma State. They might be the most intriguing team in the Big 12 to me. Maybe not this year, but within 2 years, I think Eric Morris is going to have them going really, really, really strong.
Yeah, no question about that. I mean, that's what we're going to be interested in following there in this conference, and I think it's from my perspective, it's going to be entertaining. And also, we have another local team. We've the Wasatch Front here in Utah. We've expanded our local connection to Ann Arbor, Michigan, for obvious reasons, right? I mean, their coaching staff, their players, and so forth. And Kyle Whittingham, who we've all known for many, many years in this market. He's been such a stable. I don't even have to say it anymore. You already know that. Michigan, very tough schedule. The AD stepping down and all this stuff. Kyle just brought in to clean it up. What do you make of that entire situation that he is now obviously eyeball deep in?
Well, I think for the last 5 off seasons, we've had a Michigan story that wasn't a good one. Whether it was a recruiting scandal or a sign stealing scandal or what happened with Sharon Moore and now Ward Manuel. And I think within the administration, the cleanup is underway. The one thing they won't have to worry about is on the football field, you have a serious man, right? A serious coach. And I think he's going to bring a little bit of maturity to a roster and a program that maybe didn't have that last year. And I would say this. So Michigan went 9-3 last year, and they lose to Oklahoma on the road, USC on the road, and Ohio State comes in and beats them. If Michigan goes 9-3 this year against that schedule you mentioned, where they're playing Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon. They're playing Oklahoma. If they do that, I think the vibe around the program would be completely different because it would show that Bryce Underwood developed, that their defense was okay, and that Kyle Whittingham knows what he's doing, which I think he does. I'm really interested. One layer of that, he was around that BYU-Utah rivalry for such a long time and had a good record. I don't know if you guys do it that way, but I know in Central Ohio and in Ann Arbor, I can tell you what pretty much every Ohio State or Michigan coach's record is against the other guy before I can tell you their career record. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that rivalry because as Urban Meyer, who coached at Utah, would tell him, you're judged on that. You know what I know Urban Meyer as around here? 7-0 against Michigan.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Yep.
Those coaches have gone head-to-head once. Kyle Whittingham was starting a running back in the secondary, and now Ohio State was missing NFL receivers, but they replaced them with NFL receivers. They had an NFL quarterback, and it came down to a field goal at the end of the game when the Utes lost their quarterback in the second half. Should I read into that, or bowl games one-off, it doesn't mean anything, or should I read into that Kyle Whittingham is going to figure out how to beat Ryan Day?
Well, I think you could read into one thing that I thought of when Kyle was hired was I've watched him wear out Michigan a couple times.
Yeah.
When he was at Utah. I watched him go to the Big House and wear out Michigan. I watched him do it. I believe it was Jim Harbaugh's first game.
Yep.
They went to Utah, and Utah wore them out. So he understands that element that when you play at Michigan or Ohio State, it's about the trenches. I've watched that game for 45 years. Well, maybe not when I was 1, but that game's won up front and running the football and those kind of things. That Rose Bowl, which I remember well, I would say more of a one-off, but also more of Kyle will know, hey, Ohio State's going to have receivers because, by the way, they still do. They've got a guy named Jeremiah Smith that's pretty good. But I remember that Rose Bowl more for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and look what he's done since. So, but it'll be I think he'll add a fun layer to that rivalry with Ryan Day, who, by the way, despite winning last year, people in Columbus know that he's 2-4 against Michigan. So you're judged by that game and that game a lot.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I think that he understands that rivalry. Have you been able to get your hand or get a pulse on what he's been able to do recruiting? Because so many of these guys on the staff, they don't have relationships in the manner in which they had relationships here.
Well, I think Kyle will do fine. So far, it looks like their recruiting class that's coming in will be all right. It is different when you have to jump into this part of the country, too, as anything else. But if I were selling Kyle Whittingham to a recruit in this area, I would look at, the first guy I would point to in a recent example would be like a Spencer Fano, who is playing nearby with the Cleveland Browns, and I think is going to have a fantastic career. Didn't allow a sack last year. I mean, come on. He'll be able to recruit offensive line well, and that will play well in Michigan because they love their offensive linemen. You're also competing against Ohio State, which, that's the one position of disparity. It's funny, we just talked about it. The receiver position, Ohio State's had just this litany of first-round picks at the position. Michigan hasn't had a first-round receiver since Braylon Edwards. It was like 21 years ago. So I think that's something I look at with those two programs. Does he get a couple receivers? What does Jason Beck do with the quarterback development? That's in focus right now, what he does with Bryce Underwood.
That is critical. And the one thing that I've heard is that Devin Dampier at Utah was so dialed in on that offense, which he got to run in New Mexico. So he's running it for the second year. But his decision-making was so top shelf, just excellent. And can somebody in their first year embrace it the same way? Or maybe he's such a good runner that he's going to make people look silly anyway. But that's probably the thing that most people are going to overlook is that Dampier made decisions and reads that most of us don't know about. And he made them quickly. And when they graded the film, it was always just fantastic. And so that's a high bar. If the offense is going to perform the same way, Underwood's got to be able to perform the same way.
I agree. And I think Devin Dampier, watching him last year, he was a guy that I remember we put in our Heisman sleepers just because one of the things with the Heisman was you get the guy that passes the ball, makes those decisions well, and also puts up a lot of running yards. Yep. And we knew he was going to do that. And that's the kind of the Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels theory to the Heisman. Sorry to bring up Jaden again. Didn't mean to. But when you have that quarterback that can get around 1,000 rushing yards, they'll have a chance to do it. Now, I don't know if Bryce will do that much at Michigan, but I think the arm talent, you saw it last year. It was weird. There were games and throws that he would make that it was like, okay, that's why he was a five-star guy. And then there were games where the decision-making was very tentative. And I do think some of it had to do with the guys he was throwing to. And you got to have receivers too. So it creates an interesting mix. I'm really excited to watch Oklahoma, Michigan in week 2 because as I've gone through the summer, Oklahoma's getting a lot of playoff buzz around Mateer. So, them coming up to the big house, that'll be one of those early season kind of barometers for both programs.
No question about that. We're looking forward to that game. How much pressure is on this Michigan quarterback if it doesn't get going right away because they have that big game right off the bat, week 2, I think it is. And so, they got Carr's younger brother there, and he had a nice spring for whatever that's worth. So I'm wondering what level do you think the patience is as far as the leash goes?
Well, it'll be interesting to see because, not only that, but C.J. Carr at Notre Dame, who we all know the relationship with Lloyd and, I played in the shadow of Michigan Stadium, and now he's got a chance to carry this Notre Dame team that's getting a ton of hype. And I will say it on your station as I have all summer. I think this time it's not crying wolf. It's pretty real around the Irish. I think they're going to be very, very good this year. So if that happens and Bryce Underwood fails and Tommy's sitting there behind him, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But, yeah, I think the results will be pretty good. I like the talent. I think their schedule, again, very high-level difficulty. They've got to they have Iowa coming to them. They have Penn State coming to them. Penn State's another team to watch just because their schedule's really soft. When I look at those schedules, Penn State doesn't play Oregon, Indiana, or Ohio State. I don't know how Matt Campbell got that in his favor, but I think the Nittany Lions could hang around into November as a result.
So BYU's bitten off quite a bit with Notre Dame coming in this year is what you're saying. Circle that. Notre Dame's probably going to be undefeated when they show up here.
One of the more games that probably isn't getting talked about enough because BYU is going to be in the playoff mix. Notre Dame's obviously going to be in the mix. That's one of their circle the date games to me. They haven't played in a while, if I'm not mistaken. I remember they had a home and home a while back, and that'll add to it as well. But I think BYU having Notre Dame come in there, that's probably their biggest road game. What I saw, SMU. They've got Miami coming to South Bend. For those of us who went to Catholic school in the 80s, we remember Miami Notre Dame very well in the 80s, and it'll be cool to see. I'm actually happy that rivalry's kind of reignited a little bit.
Well, Bill, we appreciate the time and the college football talk. It won't be long now. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for having me on. Take
all
care.
Right, there's Bill Bender. You can check him out. Sporting News. They got an archive. Just type in his name. You can read all the stories, and you can see his playoff predictions and why he's got BYU where he's got him.